Hey, everybody, and welcome to our continuing risk to revenue series. Hey, Ryan, how are you?
Hey, doing good, Brian. Good to be here. We're already back a couple weeks in on our next one, man. It seems like these things are just they're flying by, but good to be here.
I know the whole year is flying by, and as we wait for folks to kind of join, I just realized, man, do I feel old? We're talking about time and time flying, but in casual conversation this morning with my wife about something else, I realized I've been out of high school 40 years this year. I graduated high school in 1985. Holy cow. How does that happen, Ryan? I mean, you're still a young guy, right? But I mean, you blink and here you are.
Yeah, I no, you're right. In fact, now that you're saying it out loud, I just did some quick math. This would be my 20th year out of high school. So I'm halfway behind you. But yeah, whoa, 20 years doesn't feel like it. And as you know, I'm also a father. I have a daughter who's a junior this year in high school. And as
Yeah.
I watch my daughter, grow and progress, it's that reminder all the time, like, man, I'm getting up there. I remember coming out of high school and trying to figure out what I was going to do. And you blink, and 20 years later, here we are. So
Yeah. Yeah. Don't
yeah,
blink. Yeah.
having
Just like
fun
the
though,
song.
man. I'm having
Yeah.
fun. I've had a great
Yeah.
20-year run, and looking forward to 20 more.
Well, awesome. And I hope so too. But vulnerabilities, all this time and a lot of the vulnerabilities and how we handle them really hasn't evolved and changed all that much. But boy, before we dig in here a little bit on the topic, Ryan, I'd love to hear a little bit more about some of the boot camps and some of the stuff you're doing here. Like I think when we were chatting before we started here today, it sounded like you've got one in flight right now.
Yeah. So we can actually here. We just launched a boot camp training series last month. Um, we are in flight currently on our second one. So I completed our first one last month. We are in flight today. We do a 4-day boot camp series where we spend about 12 hours with the partners, and
Oh,
it's an intense, build the vulnerability management program out, make it defensible, have a strategy as we go in, and then put your hands on the tools and learn how to run the knobs and turn the buttons and make the lights blink. So it's been really cool. So it's been a lot of talking. So I feel like I've been just talking this week a lot. But it's been good. I love to share my insight, my perspective. I've had my teeth sunk into this space for a long time, and we want to share, right? I think this is about the community build. So yeah, boot camp has been awesome for us. Um, yeah, anybody that's interested or want to learn more, let us know. Let me know. I'd love to connect with you on it. It's about leveling everybody up at bringing education to the space. Just, what I love to do, and what we like to do here at Connect Security.
yeah, and Ryan, I don't know about you, but anytime I've led or facilitated or mentored, um, you never know a topic as well as you do until you've teached it over and over and over. And man, I'm telling you, having the ability to take something complex, articulate it, and break it down in a way that people can understand it. I mean, takes a real command of the subject, right? And I think, and that's a good segue into what we're talking about today, Ryan. I know with vulnerability scanning, I mean, with your depth and experience, and not only the tool, but the development of the tool, the maturity of the tool, the application of it, how clients and MSPs can benefit from it. Um, vulnerability scanning matters, right? And I'd say it never matters more than it does right now. Would you agree with that, Ryan?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like you said, I think it's always mattered.
Hmm.
I think right now, specifically now, and when I just really look at the industry, right? We live, and I always say this: we live on the bleeding edge of technology here in cyber. Um, there's the cutting edge where you can get hurt and get cut, and then there's the bleeding edge where you're actually just in the trenches all the time. The right of boom folks probably can really attest to some of that feeling. But as we're on that bleeding edge of tech, and we look over the last 6 to 12 months kind of seems to be my radar screen. I feel like right now we are, what we say at Connexecure is we are in the era of the rise of vulnerability. This is a
Mm-hmm.
we use around the office.
Mm-hmm.
If you look to the threat intelligence out there, like the reporting that gets done every year, there's tons of threat intel out there. Specifically, I like to go to the Verizon DBIR. I like
Mm-hmm.
CrowdStrike's reports and Gartner. They put out some really great stuff for our industry. And if you look at these reports, there is just mention after mention and graphic after graphic where exploitation of vulnerabilities is happening more often than now phishing attacks.
Mm.
The second largest entry point now in cyber attacks has been exploitation of vulnerabilities. And what do we mean by that? We're talking about unpatched systems.
Crazy.
The thing we've been saying for 20 years. I mean, when I got into
Preventable.
space,
100%
preventable,
preventable. Yeah.
easy, just low hanging fruit, I like to call it. Like we should be taking care of that at base one.
Mm-hmm.
And how we're still talking about it's crazy. But I think the vulnerability management tool and era is hopefully going to help change that tide and really to demystify it, make it easier, and streamline it. Because again, I think if you look at the report and the intel, vulnerabilities they're everywhere, and even the best maintained systems and the best maintained networks over time, they're going to get vulnerabilities. It's
Mm-hmm.
inevitable. I don't care what
Yeah.
you have. I don't care what gear you're running.
Yeah, I'm telling you this, if I hear one more time that there's a sophisticated nation state attack that brings somebody down or breaches somebody, I think I'll take a hostage because it's like, oftentimes these are an open door, an unpatched vuln, somebody gets in or chains them together, which you've talked about before, gets in, and then there's no defense in depth. Someone gets in and through a vulnerability, an open door, and then they moved east and west, right, laterally all over. They dwell time, all of that kind of stuff. So I think this is really good segue into the topic. And Ryan, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Then I'll introduce myself, and then we'll get into some of the topics.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so Ryan Seymour, VP Consulting and Education at Connexecure. Again, been in the industry about 20 years, and my primary goal around here is helping MSPs create defensible, documented vulnerability management programs that allow you to take what is a tool and a scan and turn it into a service, a revenue driver, and a risk reducer. I mean, that's what it's about, turning those tools into actionable pieces. So really great to be here. Happy to be here on behalf of Connexecure and our partners. And over to you, Mr. Brian.
Thanks, Ryan. And no Tim today, so we're doing our best to kind of fill the gap. I'm Brian Blakely, Chief Risk Officer at Compliance Scorecard. I've spent years in the MSP space as owner, operator, and strategic advisor, right? Helping businesses not only meet compliance obligations, but actually use it as a competitive advantage. And what excites me most is showing MSPs how to shift from being a cost center to being seen as more of a trusted risk partner, right? Because at the end of the day, I don't think it's just about securing systems or keeping the lights on, right? It's about protecting how your clients make money. Something Ryan and I talk about all the time, right? And that's where real trust and long-term growth come from. So when I look at our topic today, Ryan, really it's why is vulnerability scanning, one of the most underutilized tools in the MSP stack, right? And when I think about this, I of course, as the compliance nerd, go right to some of the compliance implications when we talk about vulnerability scanning. So when we do talk about scanning and compliance, I like to always remind MSPs, a scan isn't just a list of vulnerabilities, right? And a vulnerability scan is not a risk assessment, right? So again, a scan isn't just a list of vulnerabilities, but I think of it more like a story about risk, right? Too many MSPs stop at reporting technical findings, right? But the real value is connecting those findings back to what, Ryan? Business outcomes,
Right.
right? So think about it. A missing patch isn't just a red flag for IT. It means downtime for billing or a hit to client revenue or worse, right? A breach that damages trust. So that's the language I like to think that executives understand, and that's how we elevate the role of an MSP. So, and I think here's the compliance first reality, right? Regulators and auditors don't just want to see that you ran a scan once. Well, I'd have to say a good auditor or assessor. They'll want to make sure that they're going to expect evidence, right, of consistent, repeatable scanning practices with documentation. You're tracking remediations and follow up and residual risk, right? So without that alignment, scans I think become noise, right? That's the last thing we need, Ryan, is more noise. So they become noise instead of something actionable that the business can resource and remediate. So compliance isn't paperwork. It's proof of resilience, right? Our ability to, if we do recognize a vulnerability, we have the wherewithal, the resources to mitigate that right down to acceptable level of risk. So if you can make that shift in your client conversations, you stop, and this is important as an MSP, you stop competing on price, right? You decommoditize yourself and you start leading on value. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, no, I love all the points you made. Well taken. Um, I'm going to take the topic back a step, but I want to acknowledge when you're dealing with compliance and regulation, I think vulnerability management's a lot easier for the MSPs out here, right? When you have compliance and you have legal, adherence saying, hey, you need to do this, then it's usually really easy to get vulnerability management in the door, and because you have to. I think the bigger challenge has been how can we make it proactive for those that are not being told they must do it, and not have it become just another tool, just another scan, just more alerts and more noise for your team to have to sort through. Because that's usually what it turns into. So I think I like to talk about effective vulnerability management before we get to the tool, right? There's steps before it, I think, that we have to kind of go through. And I think you identified the very first one, some kind of business impact analysis, some kind of understanding of the network or client you're supporting, what industry they operate in, and how they produce revenue. And if they're a nonprofit, then how they produce customer service. Because it's one of those two things are usually driving that. So I like to get that out there. I think the other obstacles become sales enablement, pricing and packaging. MSPs struggle to know how to put those things in to customers that are not being told they have to do it for regulations. It's the SMB customers that have tight budgets and are price conscious about adding things. I think MSPs have struggled because the sales enablement hasn't been there. MSPs are really great at running scans and deploying tools and doing firewalls, but they're not so great at doing the BIA. They're not so great at having the pricing and packaging conversations because it's about risk. And then I think the documentation is always missing. I mean, again, just this week, I talked to MSPs. I had over 40 MSPs that I'm talking to, and 25 of them don't have documentation. We get into a vulnerability management discussion and a tool. I don't care about what tool you're using. This isn't a tool discussion. A tool is a tool, a scanner is a scanner. I always start the conversation with, where's the policy? Where's the documentation for what you intend to do and what you're supposed to be doing?
1,000%, right?
Gotta have it.
Yeah, I mean that's what I always ask. Hey, you're going to do a vulnerability scan or even penetration test. It's like, oh, great. Here's the results. What are you going to do? What's the policy say? What's your risk assessment say? Then how you're going to attack these? How are you going to prioritize these? Are you going to give me a blank check and we fix everything? How do you take some of these vulnerabilities and instead put them in map them to the critical business functions that drive revenue. And something else you said about nonprofit too. I get asked this a lot because this is risk to revenue, right? This is our series, and they're like, well, wait a second, we're nonprofits, Brian. You're talking about risk to revenue. We're a nonprofit. Well, two things come to mind, right? A little bit. Without money, your nonprofit will probably not function, whether it's donors, members, whatever that is, right? So it always boils down to money. But I always say instead of revenue, you can substitute in the word mission. I like that when you were talking about mission driven or nonprofit organizations, you can say what's the risk to the instead of risk to revenue, risk to mission. So for all of our MSPs that support nonprofits out there, that's another way to frame it, and maybe we're talking about context, a way that will resonate with your nonprofit client you support.
Yeah. No, I think we're just reinforcing the principle that we always say is you have to tie the technical vulnerability stuff back to the business through their language,
Yeah.
however that looks. And again, what drives people? What drives our business owners out there? Majority of them are driven by revenue. I think all of us would agree revenue is usually the driver. But again, if you're in the nonprofit space, you're in the education space, I tend to see people and customer service becomes the driver. That becomes important to those companies. So I think the mission is a really elegant way of saying it, Brian. So I'm probably going to start using that. So thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
How do we
Yeah,
protect the mission? That's what we're doing.
yeah, for sure. So let's get into scenario a little bit. The scenario for today, as I look at our outline, uh, during a quarterly review, a vulnerability scan identifies multiple critical issues on a client's environment, including outdated VPN software and unpatched servers. The client pushes back and says, every MSP will I've heard that before. The client pushes back and says, we thought you were already handling patching and updates. Why are these vulnerabilities showing up now?
Mm.
So let me talk a little bit about maybe ownership and compliance stuff, and then I'll turn it over to you, Ryan. It's a great question. We hear that. In fact, you could probably, whether it's vulnerabilities or anything, if it plugs in a wall or whatever, it's the MSP's fault, right? The MSP is supposed to take care of everything, right? The coffee maker, if AV equipment, all that kind of stuff. So vulnerabilities are obviously even more forefront. But what I think one of the biggest challenges MSPs face is defining ownership. I see it in compliance engagements all the time, especially CMMC level 2, where the first thing I'll ask the MSP, who is categorized as a external service provider in the CMMC world, I'll say, okay, great. Let's start with your shared responsibility matrix, because I want to see across these 320 assessment objectives, MSP, what are you taking care of? What's the client taking care of? And what are the things that you're sharing, right? And so many don't have this. So I think that's where I come in. Is it's a good place to start if you're an MSP, is with your shared responsibility matrix. And I think one of the biggest challenges, like I said, MSPs face is defining ownership. Where does the MSP's responsibility stop and the client's responsibility, or even the vendor's responsibilities, begin, right? If that line isn't crystal clear, you're not just creating risk, you're creating confusion, right? It's important to remember a scan tool is used to expose gaps, not to close them, okay? The real value is using that baseline to create accountability. Who needs to act, by when, and with what level of prioritization? Right. So I think smart MSPs can use compliance frameworks sometimes as a boundary map. Ryan, you brought up policies, right? That's all part of a compliance framework. But you can use that as kind of a boundary map. So you say, here's what we own, here's what you own, and here's how we succeed together. Right. That kind of clarity at the end of the day is gold, because it shifts you from being the fix it IT shop to being more of a strategic risk partner who drives accountability across your client's business. Ryan, what's your take on that? Hey, I thought you were doing it kind of mantra. I'm sure you've got an interesting perspective on this.
Yeah, no, I like to I think mine's very similar to yours, Brian, and it's that just as a consultant in general, I think that whether you're a consultant, an entrepreneur, one man shop, or you are part of an MSP organization and you support lots of things, I think that it's about commanding, being the expert, right? First and foremost, we have to do that. We have to be the experts and we have to educate our customers on what is out there. What does the risk landscape look like? What is the attack surface? All they think about is the things they plug into the walls and maybe the physical stuff they know they can see and touch. We all know there's a whole other side of that that's virtual, cloud-based. There's stuff out there that they're not even thinking about. So I think that us, again, being in command of being able to identify all of the assets and the infrastructure for them, but then being able to document and have a plan of responsibility. And this to me goes back to, a section of in my vulnerability management program document, we point one of the very first sections is roles and responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's when we're going to have that moment of clarity at the company where we're going to say, what do we call our teams? What are the words we use? Is it the vulnerability management lead? Is it the cyber team? Is it the help desk? Is it the CISO? Maybe you have all of those things, but you need to define them. And then who's responsible to do what? Who's working on what portions of this program? And I think as the MSP, if you go through that painful exercise internally and you just do it, go through it, you'll find those moments of clarity. And then when you go to present to your customer, you have a plan. You get to set expectations. You get to set the boundaries. Because if you don't do that, we all know what happens. The customer says, well, I thought you were doing that. And you didn't tell me. So to avoid all of that, it's like, come lean in on the very first moment you talk to that customer, because nothing tells me that I want to work with you more than you have a plan. You have a map. I know I want to go to this place and you have a map that's already going to navigate me through all these places I didn't even know I was going to arrive to because I'm not aware of all of it. That's what I need my map person to do. So I think of the MSP as that interpreter. So I think if you lean in with your documentation and get it out of the way first, not only does it allow you to set the expectations, but it allows you to deliver predictable, repeatable, scalable service. And now I'm not trying to manage this customer this way. This customer thinks this customer does it this way. I don't like to play those kind of games. I don't think MSP should be playing those games. That's not how you scale. You have to have a standard. You go in, you don't go and see your physician or a doctor and tell them what to do, right? They tell us what to do. They make those. I would be doing the same. So I think that's my vision through that. And again, it always starts with documentation. And if you do it once and you do it right, you can go to 5, 10, 20, 30 customers and do it over and over again. And you want to talk about efficiency gained. Now your team becomes efficient about how that is all managed.
Yeah, for sure. And you've said a couple key words I want to pluck out quickly here: leadership and education, right? Part of leadership and education with your client, and clients want to be led. They really do at the end of the day. They're looking for leadership. They can get order takers anywhere. They're looking for leadership. And part of good, clear leadership is setting clear, understandable expectations up front. Hey, here's what our relationships looks like. Here's what we're doing. Here's some of the things we're going to find. And when we find them, we're going to work on them together to fix them and shrink risk, right? If you say up front, we're selling you peace of mind, that to me, that sets an expectation that you're going to take care of everything. Hey, I pay you $5,000 a month for you to take care of everything, right? It's not good, clean set of expectations, nor is it, to your point, roles and responsibilities. So let's get quickly to the second scenario here, Ryan. The second scenario, MSP runs scheduled vulnerability scans across multiple client environments. The scans return hundreds of findings, many of them labeled high risk. The client's leadership team gets the automated report and panics, which I don't know why the company's leadership team is going to get the automated report before you have a chance to get to dive in front of the grenade. But the client's team, leadership team gets the automated reports and panics. Are we exposed? Why didn't you tell us earlier? How do we even prioritize this? So the scenario is a bit flawed, but let's go with it a little bit, right?
Yeah. So
So I'll chime in here real quick, and then I'll turn it over to you. But another trap, Ryan, and this is probably what you're thinking too, is treating risk as kind of one size fits all. We've been you talk all the time, as do I, about business context, business impact, that kind of thing. But a vulnerability in like an HR's time tracking system doesn't really carry the same weight as one in your client's ERP or payment system. So not every high in a scanner is truly critical in practice or in the business. That's why I think smart MSPs use risk prioritization type of frameworks. And again, not just looking at CVSS scores, but also exploitability. And most importantly, what is it? Business impact, right? Because executives don't care. Your client's leadership does not care about the number of highs, mediums, and lows. They care about which risk could actually disrupt how their business makes what? Money. Right. So here's the key, I think. Risk conversations should be ongoing, not event driven. And I would also say in the scenario, the scan should never go directly to your client's leadership team without a chance to provide, like Ryan, you were talking about that education and interpretation kind of thing, right? But if you treat scans as opportunities to keep leadership engaged in kind of risk trade-offs, you move from delivering, I think, technical noise to delivering real business insight. I think that's what's going to win some long-term trust. What do you think, Ryan?
yeah, I think I'm going to pluck the words I heard that just set off my radar was risk prioritization, right? Again, that needs to be defined in your program, called out. This is what risk prioritization is. These are the ways we measure it. I think the number one should always be business impact. How does this risk impact the business? I don't care if it's a low, medium, or high. If there's something impacting the ability to produce revenue, the customer will care about it. Those are our moments to shine. I don't care if it's a low with a 0.9 or a 0.2345 EPSS. I don't care. All I care is, hey, this is potentially going to impact your ability to produce 72% of your revenue because it impacts these systems.
100%.
Hold on a second. What?
They lean in, right? You've got their attention.
Yes, I've caught, and you get about 8 seconds to have a lean in moment before you've glazed me over with a EPCVND. What?
Well, that's 8 seconds while they're looking at their email or phone while you're talking too,
Yes.
right? So you got to get their attention.
Business impact, number one. Then you can use the traditional telemetry of severity because that's easy. But then I think you can also lean in on, how wide is the net, and how long does it take to resolve? Because if there's low hanging fruit there that I can take care of quickly and it's going to impact lots of things, those are also quick wins. People like quick wins.
Yeah.
People like to see, hey, you had 300, now you only have 200, even though that 200 may have been 2 patches.
The trend's going the right way. Well, Ryan, that's awesome. As we get close on time here, why don't you give us kind of your key takeaway for today, and then I'll do mine, and we'll close her out.
Yeah. So key takeaway for me is, if every scan opportunity you have is an invitation for you to have these conversations with your customers, you've already done the hard part, getting the scanner in there. That's usually the tough beans. Use those opportunities to have those risk conversations with your customers about the scan data. Don't send them reports automated. Set up a meeting and discuss those things with them. Educate them. This is about education. This isn't about automation, set it and forget it and just get the check. I mean, we all want to do that. But the reality is, in this market, we need to be educating our customers and it's their vulnerabilities, it's their risk. Let's show them that we're on their team and fighting as part of their team. So I would lean in on that opportunity as an MSP. And secondly, just get your documentation ready. Have a plan, come in with a plan. So if they say, how do you do this? You can say, here's the 42 pages. We done this before. You're in good terms. I'm not even going to read it. I'm just going to be like, okay, this guy's got a plan. That's the guy I want to work with. So those are my takeaways for you guys.
Awesome, Ryan. Well, I'll go quickly here and then we'll close it out for today. But let me close kind of with the big picture too, right? A scan without interpretation is just data and noise, right? But if you interpret that scan, if you contextualize it and tie it to business outcomes, you've created insight. And insight is what your clients and their executive team actually pay for. So you're not in the business of selling compliance or security. You're in the business of selling confidence, clarity, and resilience, right? I think that's what's going to separate a vendor from a partner. And the key takeaway I want you to remember, that MSPs who win in the next decade are going to be the ones who stop competing on tools, right, and start competing on trust. If you walk away from every client meeting asking, how does this risk impact how they make money, right? You'll change the conversation, you'll deepen the relationship, and you'll put yourself in a category your competitors can't touch you, right? So that's the mindset shift that transforms an MSP into a strategic risk leader, and it starts the moment you decide to stop selling fixes and start selling foresight. Okay. So with that, we will, both Ryan and I will drop the mic. But by all means, track us down if you've got questions or want to learn more. We'd be excited to talk about it. We're both passionate about security and compliance. So consider us friends in your ecosystem. Yeah. Thanks all.
Thanks all.
Subscribe now.